Ego is powerful stuff, my friend. Hey, I thought, don't teach your grandmother to suck eggs. Altruism, I said aloud. They find themselves rushing regularly to the blood bank, so they rationalize that it's because they're good people. They become proud of it, brag about it. You've got it, Les said. And because they're proud, even sanctimonious about their newfound generosity, they tend to extend it, to bring it to other parts of their lives. I whispered in a hush awe. An altruism virus? Jesus, Les. When we announced this, I stopped when I saw the sudden frown and instantly thought it was because I used that word we. I should have known better, of course, for Les was always more than willing to share the credit. No, his reservations was far more serious than that. Not yet, Forey. We can't publish this yet. I shook my head. Why not? This is big, Les. It proves much of what you've been saying all along about symbiosis and all that. There could even be a Nobel in it. I'd been Gooch and spoken aloud of the ultimate. But he did not seem to notice. Damn, if only Les had been like most biologists, driven more than anything else by the lure of Stockholm. But no, you see, Les was a natural altruist. It was his fault, you see. Him and his damn virtue. They drove me to first contemplate what I next decided to do. Don't you see, Forey? If we publish, they'll develop an antibody test for the Alice virus. Donors carrying it will be barred from the blood banks, just like those carrying AIDS and syphilis and hepatitis. And that would be incredibly cruel torture to those poor addicts and carriers. Screw the carriers, I almost shouted. Several pizza patrons glanced my way. Pizza patrons. With a desperate effort, I brought my voice down. Look, Les, the carriers will be classified as diseased, won't they? So they'll go under doctor's care. And if all it takes is to make them feel better is to bleed them regularly, well then we'll give them pet leeches. Les smiled. Clever, but that's not the only or even my main reason for it. I'm not going to publish yet, and that is final. I just can't allow anybody to stop this disease. It's got to spread, to become an epidemic, to become a pandemic. I stared, and upon seeing that look in his eyes, I knew that Les was more than an altruist. He had caught that specially insidious of all human ailments, the Messiah complex. Les wanted to save the world. Don't you see, he said urgently, with the fervor of a proselyte. Selfishness and greed are destroying the planet, Forey. But nature always finds a way, and this time symbiosis may be giving us our last chance and final opportunity to become better people, to learn to cooperate before it's too late. The things we're most proud of, our prefrontal lobes, those bits of gray matter above the eyes which makes us so much smarter than beasts. What good have they done us, Forey? Not a hell of a lot. We aren't going to think our way out of the crisis of the 20th century, or at least thought alone won't do it. We need something else as well. And Forey, I'm convinced that something else is, alas, Alice. We've got to keep this secret, at least until it's so well established in the population that there's no turning back. I swallowed. How long? How long do you want to wait? Until it starts affecting voting patterns? Until the next election? He shrugged. Oh, at least that long. 5 years. Possibly 7. You see, the virus tends to only get into people who've recently had surgery, and they're generally older. Fortunately, they're also often influential. Just the sort who now vote Tory, he went on and on. I listened with half an ear, but I already had come to the fateful realization a 7 year wait for a goddamn co authorship would make this discovery next to useless to my career and my ambitions. Of course, I could blow the secret on Les now that I knew of it, but that would only embitter him, and he'd easily take all the credit for the discovery, anyways. People tend to remember innovators, not whistleblowers. We paid our bill and walked toward Charing Cross Station, where we would catch the tube to Paddington, and from there to Oxford. Along the way, we ducked out of a sudden downpour at the street-side ice cream vendor. While we waited, I bought us both cones. I remember quite clearly that he had strawberry, and I had a raspberry ice. While Les absent-mindedly talked about his research plans, a small pink smudge colored the corner of his mouth. I pretended to listen, but already my mind had turned to other things. Nascent plans and earnest scenarios for committing murder. It would be the perfect crime, of course. Those movie detectives are always going on about motive, means, and opportunity. Well, motive I had in plenty. But it was a one so far-fetched, so obscure, that it would surely never occur to anybody. Means, hell. I worked in a business rife with means. There were poisons and pathogens galore. We're a very careful profession, but, well, accidents do happen. The same holds for our opportunity. There was a rub, of course, such a boy genius reputation that even if I did succeed in nobbling him, I didn't dare come out immediately with my own announcement. Damn him. Everyone would just assume it was his work anyway, or his leadership here at the lab, at least that led to the discovery of Alice. And besides, too much fame for me right after his demise might lead someone to suspect a motive. So I realized Les was going to get his delay after all. Maybe not 7 years, but 3 or 4 perhaps, during which I'd move back to the States, start a separate line of work, and subtly guide my own research to cover methodically all the bases Les had recently flown over in flashes of inspiration. I wasn't happy about the delay, but at the end of that time, it would look entirely like my own work. No co-authorship for Forey on this one. No, sir. The beauty of it was that nobody would ever think of connecting me with the tragic death of my colleague and friend. Years before, after all, did not his demise set me back in my career temporarily? Ah, if only poor Les had lived to see your success, my competitors would say, suppressing jealous bile as they watched me pack for Stockholm. Of course, none of this appeared on my face or in my words. We both had normal work to do. But almost every day, I also put in long extra hours helping Les in our secret project. In its own way, it was an exhilarating time, and Les was lavish in his praise of the slow, dull, but methodical way I fleshed out some of his ideas. I made my arrangements slowly, knowing Les was in no hurry. Together we gathered data. We isolated and even crystallized the virus, got an X-ray diffractions, did epidemiological studies, all in strictest secrecy. Amazing, Les would cry out as he uncovered the way a less virus forced its hosts to feel their need to give. He'd wax eloquent, effusive, over-elegant mechanisms which he ascribed to random selection, but which I could not help superstitiously attributing to some incredibly insidious form of intelligence. The more subtle and effective we found its techniques to be, the more admiring Les became. And the more I found myself loathing those little packets of RNA and protein. The fact that the virus seemed so harmless, Les thought commensal, only made me hate it more. It made me glad of what I had planned. Glad that I was going to stymie Les in his scheme to give Alice free rein. I was going to save humanity from this would-be puppet master. True, I'd delay my warning to suit my own purposes, but the warning would come nonetheless, and sooner than my unsuspecting compatriot planned. Little did Les know that when he was doing background work for I'd take credit for. Every flash of insight, his every eureka, was stored away in my private notebook beside my own columns of boring data. Meanwhile, I sorted through all the means at my disposal. Finally, I selected for my agent a particularly virulent strain of dengue fever. There's an old saying we have in Texas: a chicken is just an egg's way of making more eggs. To biologists familiar with those Latinized, gracificated words, this saying is much more posh version. Humans are zygotes, made up of diploid cells containing 46 paired chromosomes, except for our haploid sex cells or gametes. Males' gametes are sperm and females are eggs, each containing only 23 chromosomes. So biologists say that a zygote is only a gamete's way of making more gametes. Clever, eh? But it does point out just how hard it is in nature to pin down a primal cause. Some center to the puzzle against which everything else can be calibrated. I mean, which does come first, the chicken or the egg? Man is the measure of all things, goes another wise old saying. Oh, yeah. Tell that to a modern feminist. 1988. A guy I once knew who used to read science fiction told me about this story he'd seen, in which it turned out that the whole and entire purpose of humanity, brains and all, was to be the organism that built starships so that houseflies could migrate out and colonize the galaxy. But that idea is nothing compared with what Les Acheson believed. He spoke of the human animal as if he were describing a veritable United Nations. From the E. coli in our guts to tiny commensal mites that clean our eyelashes for us, to the mitochondria that energize our cells, all the way to the contents of our very DNA. Les saw it all as a great big hive compromise, negotiation, symbiosis. Most of the contents of our chromosomes came from past invaders, he contended. Symbiosis? The picture he created in my mind was one of minuscule puppeteers, all yanking and jerking at us with their protein strings, making us marionettes dance to their own tunes, to their own nasty, selfish little agendas. And you were the worst. Like most cynics, had always maintained a secret faith in human nature. Yes, most people are pigs. I've always known that, and while I may be a user, at least I'm honest enough to admit it. But deep down, we users count on the sappy, inexplicable generosity and the mysterious, puzzling altruism of those others, that kind, inexplicable, decent folk, those we superficially sneer at in contempt and secretly hold in awe. Then you came along, damn you. You make people behave that way. There is no mystery left after you get finished. no corner remaining impenetrable to cynicism. Damn, how I came to hate you. And I came to hate Les Addison. I made my plans, schemed my brilliant campaign against both of you. In those last days of innocence, I felt oh so savagely determined, so deliciously decisive, and in control of my own destiny. In the end, it was anticlimactic. It didn't even have time to finish my preparations, to arrange that little trap, that sharp bit of glass dipped in just the right mixture of deadly microorganisms. For Caphook arrived then, just before I could exercise my option as a murderer. Caphook changed everything. Catastrophic autoimmune pulmonary collapse. Acronym for the horror that made AIDS look like a minor irritant. And in the beginning, it appeared unstoppable. Its vectors were completely unknown, and the causative agent defied isolation for so long, like 6 months. This time, it was no easily identifiable group that came down with a new plague, though it concentrated upon the industrialized world. School children in some areas seemed particularly vulnerable. In other places, it was secretaries and postal workers. Naturally, all the major epidemiology labs got involved. Les predicted that the pathogen would turn out to be something akin to the prions, which causes shingles in sheep and certain plant diseases. A pseudo life form even simpler than a virus and even harder to track down. It was a heretical minority view until the CDC in Atlanta decided, out of desperation, to try his theories out, and found the very dormant viroids Les predicted mixed in with the glue used to seal paper milk cartons, envelopes, postage stamps. Les was a hero, of course. Most of us in the labs were. After all, we had been in the first line of defense. Our own causality rate had been ghastly. For a while there, funerals and other public gatherings were discouraged, but an exemption was made for Les. The procession behind his cortege was a mile long. I was asked to deliver the eulogy, and when they pleaded with me to take over the lab, I agreed.